Hi everyone, I'm Miguel Rivera, and this is Real Talk with Miguel Rivera. You're listening to Real Talk with Miguel Rivera, a podcast that inspires individuals to connect, build community, and pursue their passion. My name is Miguel Rivera, and I'm an educator, community advocate, and executive director of Dream Big Project. And I'm sitting down with passionate and inspiring individuals to talk about their stories, the lessons they've learned, and how they're making an impact. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, humans of all ages. I am your host, Miguel Rivera. Welcome to episode 15 of Real Talk with Miguel Rivera. I have a very special person with me today, and I'm excited to introduce you to. Her name is Jacqueline Sandoval, and Jacqueline is an associate professional clinical counselor and just finished her last semester of classes as a doctoral student of Clinical Forensic Psychologist. She has been practicing as a therapist for about 5 years now. Jackie, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Prior to us starting recording, we talked a little bit about Metropolitan Hospital that you did your internship at, or was it? You were working there?
I volunteered there.
Volunteered?
Yes, I volunteered there.
So the conversation surrounding the Metropolitan Hospital, especially, it's in Norwalk, I believe?
It is, yeah.
A lot of people are very unaware of what goes on in there, what it is. Some people think it's closed or not even in operation anymore. Can you talk a little bit about your experience as a volunteer there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I volunteered there back in 2013, so it's been quite some time ago. But yeah, no, it does. I mean, I don't blame people for thinking that it's not open because it does look a little bit run down and everything. And but my experience there is kind of really what sparked my full-on interest in the mental health field. I worked alongside with a lot of psychologists and a lot of social workers in the hospital, and really focusing on the rehabilitation of the patients there. I worked specifically in the forensic unit. So that was working with the not guilty by reason of insanity, and then also the ones that are found incompetent to stand trial. So kind of restoring their competency so they can return back to court, have their trial, and then continue on with the proceedings and stuff.
Were there any cases or individuals that stood out to you the most during your time there?
That was my first time ever being exposed to that type of population. And by what I mean by that type is a lot of the times, the patients there, because they're found incompetent to stand trial, they're really out of contact with reality. And what that means is just basically they're in a delusional state or a paranoid state. So very high psychosis or schizophrenia, where they're hearing things, believing things that aren't real. So that was the big culture shock to me, because before that, all I thought about really mental illness much was depression and anxiety, which are the big things that we all hear about. But then there are just so many different other
That's so true.
Yeah.
That a lot of people don't really get exposed to or not in conversations regarding schizophrenia in general. So right away you think the worst and don't really understand kind of just what that's all about.
Exactly.
What is it like there? What are the operations like? You mentioned these individuals are, they can't stand trial, right? So what is it like from day to day operations at the Metropolitan Hospital? So
when I was there, the way the program ran is when they had an admit patient, they administer a cognitive assessment. So basically what that was is just to see where they are cognitively, to even see if they're able to restore their cognitive abilities. So when a person needs to be found competent to stand trial, it means that they understand the charges that are being pressed against them. They understand the course of the jury trial, whether, what the jury is, who their lawyer is, what they're taking, and all these different aspects of the court proceedings. So if they're not able to do that, that's where they get sent to a state hospital.
Got it.
So basically that it focused on doing that in terms of programs and group structures that were surrounding the restoration of their competency.
And is each individual, are they receiving all the services there, or some more catered to others? How does that work?
Everyone pretty much gets the same type of services. They all attend the same groups. I remember them having a music group. They had a music therapist come in and do things like that with them. They have a competency group where they're able to go in and work with therapists that help them understand their charges and everything. If there were some that needed a little bit more one-on-one help, those services were provided to them. And I was able to do that for some of them too, just kind of work more one-on-one with them. Now
that, that was in 2013, you mentioned, now that we're much down the road now, 2021, looking back, I'm pretty sure you appreciate your experience there, but is there more that you kind of wanted out of that you didn't get at the time? Kind of thinking back on it now?
I think that I was lucky enough to work with a really great psychologist that was there. And he was just super open to me kind of like really diving into the work and getting as much experience.
That is cool. Yeah.
So he was really great.
Yeah, those are great supervisors. People can really expose you and are, patient enough to help you out in that way.
Yeah.
Because not everybody's like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I had no clinical, that was literally me fresh out of college, fresh out of UC Santa Barbara.
Oh, and you were just a general volunteer.
It
wasn't for school.
It was nothing for school related, nothing. I was just like, okay, I think this is what I want to do. Let me try it out, see if I like it. I went, I was like, yeah, this is what I need to do.
That was, so after, so.
And then that's what made me pursue getting my master's and.
So that's what really was like, all right, I'm doing this. How long were you volunteering for? How long were you doing that for?
Yeah, so I graduated from UCSB 2013 of June. So literally a month after I started looking into volunteering there. And I was there for about, I want to say maybe half a year or so, maybe a little bit longer. So it wasn't too long of a time, but it was a good amount of time for me to.
Did you do your undergrad, or did you get your bachelor's in psychology, or what did you go in?
I did get my bachelor's. I ended up getting my bachelor's in psychology.
Oh, okay.
I started off as pre-med.
Oh, really?
I know. Biology. I literally, took all the freaking prerequisites, everything.
Oh, man. What happened?
I did all that. And then I went into a school counselor, and I was getting ready to start going into the actual requirements for the degree and all that stuff. Yeah, the upper division and all that. And the counselor was just like, well, that's going to be a lot of work. You're going to be in the library for 12 plus hours, blah, blah, blah.
Man.
And back then, little 20-year-old me was just 12 hours in the library? Heck no.
Right?
I go to beautiful Santa Barbara.
I know.
No thanks. So we were looking over my courses and stuff, and I was like, okay, what is a degree that I can get still without delaying my graduation process?
Right.
What? She's like, well, you've completed all of psychology courses and this and that, which I was kind of interested in, but I was just so determined and closed-minded on okay, no, I'm going to go to med school and blah, blah, blah. And, I don't know, I was just so fixated on that. But I ended up taking a psychology course with an amazing professor at UC Santa Barbara. His name was Dr. Fridlin, and he was just so great. And after that, I was just kind of taking a little more courses. And then I switched my major, I think, my junior year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, pretty late in the game.
Was that was after you had that conversation with, okay.
After, and then I switched it, and then, I graduated psychology. And
you still graduated on time, that window that you wanted to?
Yeah.
And then after that, you graduate, you come back to Norwalk from Santa Barbara, and you're thinking, what? What are you thinking? Where do I go now? What do I want to do? What is that?
Pretty much.
I can relate, but I wonder what your experience was like with that.
Yeah, I think that transition, I don't know if I can speak for everyone, but I feel like it's a difficult transition to come out of college because you're technically supposed to have your life figured out, right? And you're it's far from, at least for me, it was far from it. I was like, what am I going to do now? What's next for me? What do I do? I have this degree in psychology. realistically, like when you have those types of degrees, like you can get a like okay job, maybe not in the field,
right?
Possibly if you know connections or whatever, but in order to stay in that field, you kind of have to go and pursue a higher education.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
right.
I still wasn't sure what route I wanted to go. I was interested in psychology, but I just didn't know what areas because there's so much
really
to do. Exactly. And so, yeah, that's what made me kind of want to apply to volunteer.
Get more exposed to the field in general.
Yeah.
And of all things, you decided to go to the Metropolitan State Hospital, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's a great experience for sure. I know for me, when I graduated, I got my bachelor's in sociology. And every time I say that, I think of one of my instructors at Dominguez Hills. And she was one of my sociology professors who also got her bachelor's in sociology. And I remember her saying she was like this older lady who was really cool and very straightforward. And I really appreciated that about her. But she was like, oh, all right, you guys are almost graduating. You know, you're going to go get your degree in sociology and go open up your little sociology office, you know, your little business.
Practice,
yeah, right? So I was like, in the beginning, I was like, what does she mean by that? Like, I don't really understand what she's saying. And then afterwards, I started to kind of understand, like, oh, okay, there's only so much, there's not really a specific thing you can do with sociology. It's such a broad thing. But sociology in general, I really, really enjoyed that. Similar to you, I went into engineering, then business, then sociology. So I made a few changes myself. And then, a year or two later, I was like, I want to do my master's, like, because I started substitute teaching. And so I knew I wanted to be in education, didn't know what. Do I want to be an admin? Do I want to be a counselor, teacher? I really don't know. So through substitute teaching, I was exposed to the classroom, how that goes.
Yeah.
And then after a while, I was like, I don't think I want to be a teacher. I appreciate teachers and all that they do because it's not easy.
Hell no.
And hell no, it's not. So shout out to all the teachers out there.
For real, shout out.
Super, because I did a few long-term substitute teacher assignments, like a month or two. After that, I was like, I don't want no more long-term assignments. So, that's when I decided school counseling is where I want to go. And then, boom, that's where I made that move. So you pursued your master's right after you volunteered, or how much longer did you decide, okay, I want to do this, I want to pursue my master's? How did that go about for you?
Yeah, pretty much. There was this girl that I volunteered there with, and she started talking to me about the program that she was going to and, all these things. She's like, yeah, it's the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. You should actually enroll right now. Like they're admitting, I think, I forgot, like applicants for the fall or something like that it was. And like I looked more into it and everything. And then that's kind of when I began the application process. So this was sometime in like, I want to say maybe like probably like March, April or so or whatever of the following year.
Right.
And it was because of her. Honestly, I would have never like known that this program even existed because it's a forensic psychology program. So
you make sure there's not that many like in the area, right? That's really cool that you were able to come across that through her. So once you got that, you applied and you were good after that.
Yeah, I applied. I got accepted. I started school that fall of 2014. And then, yeah. And
then now you're finishing up your doctoral program, right? Your PsyD. And you're currently doing your dissertation. You completed your dissertation.
I'm in the works of completing it, yeah. So I just basically have to prepare my defense, and then once I defend, like it's a done deal.
That's gonna be awesome. It's a wrap after that,
dude.
How are you feeling about that? When is that taking place, anyways?
Within the next week or so.
Oh,
yeah. So
okay. Hey, let's defend right now. No, I'm just kidding.
So cool. Yes, please though, because
right?
it has to be. Yeah, I have a strict deadline by June 30th where it literally has to be in publication, manuscript, and all that stuff. So I need to get the ball rolling with defending.
What does a defending for you look like, or in general, what does that look like when someone has to defend their dissertation?
So, I mean, the whole dissertation process or dissertation project is a huge project for those that like are interested in even pursuing a doctoral degree. It's just this big old research project that you have to do on a topic that you're interested in, and you basically go through the process of picking your topic, writing up the first 3 chapters, which consist of the introduction of the topic, the literature review of like what's already been done, and then like how you're going to execute basically your project. So that's the proposal.
That's a proposal.
So you propose your topic, and then
And it has to get approved?
It has to get approved before you can even continue on with anything.
So it's not just getting your topic approved, but you have to create a structure, like a portfolio of your topic. Like, hey, this is what I want to do it on. Basically. And it's kind of thorough. You break it down, and they go through it, and they have to approve you. And then after you're approved, you go into what after that?
Then you go into the IRB approval, which is the Institutional Review Board, where they kind of look through your project, make sure that you're not violating any ethical concerns and things like that. And then they approve your topic, and then you can start conducting your research pretty much. So
is that the fun part, conducting research, or is any of it more funner than the other?
Honestly, none of it was fun. None of the whole and that's what made me like literally want to quit every single time. Like so bad. It's such a daunting process.
I admire you for going through this.
God, I don't even know how I got through it. I thought I was never gonna get through it, to be honest.
You're here.
But yeah, I'm pretty much finishing up the final chapters, which is it's a 5-chapter long thing, and the final chapters are pretty much just analyzing your data, like what you gathered from your research,
right?
And then discussing the results, pretty much. And
go ahead. No, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, was all your research, the research that you conducted, was it based in the U.S. or did you look internationally? Or can you talk a little bit more about your research?
Yeah, definitely. So the research project that I kind of did with mine, ideally that was one of like my limitations. Ideally, I had wanted to do it like across all of the United States, but since most of my participants were centered in California, so it was literally kind of more like California residents.
Nice.
So I'm pretty sure that kind of skewed the data a little bit. But it was just basically composed of a series of questions. I measured people's gender role attitudes we were talking about. Yeah, and then
your topic.
My
right?
topic, yeah, and then
which I think is a great topic, by the way.
Yeah,
I don't think you mentioned it on the air. What's your topic?
So my dissertation is on how gender role attitudes influence the public's punitive judgment and perceptions of mental illness on mothers and fathers who murder their children.
That's a great topic.
Yeah, and it's just basically that's just been something that's been so heavily like out there in the news, and there's just, little research on it to begin with. So,
exactly. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. Right. That must have been a tough part of your research.
Yeah.
Really finding credible data or just research in general that aligns with your topic. Because I'm sure because you have like 3 different key things in your topic. You have gender norms and roles, right? Then you have, and going into that, mother and dad's role, and then you have killing your children role.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you introduce that in your research individually, kind of break down, or do you just kind of package it all the entire time?
No, you definitely you have to pretty much, it's like a recipe. Like you have to give it like step by step by step. Right. So my literature review is literally composed of, the different data and information that I got on, mothers and fathers, gender roles. And then, filicide, which is the correct term for parents who murder their filicide.
Filicide.
Yeah, that's the term for parents who murder. Yeah.
Filicide. Okay. I didn't know that. That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. So it was, yeah.
What made you select this topic?
Like I said, it's just been a topic that's been in the media for so long. And I used to work with foster children. And then just kind of seeing the impact that a lot of child abuse has. And in the research too, I found that a lot of the times, like the reason why like filicide even occurs, like majority of it is due to an accidental death of the kid because the parent took it too far with their abuse. Like, you know, the kicking and hitting and, you know, physical abuse, that it actually resulted in the child's death. In
your research, did you come across that the physical abuse was the main contributor to?
Absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this is mother and father. These are stepfathers or any other guardians considered in this research? Or
yes, it's pretty much like any caretaker as a whole. It doesn't necessarily need to be the biological mother or father.
Was there like a specific youth population, for example, foster youth, that stood out more than others in your research, or did I didn't
necessarily focus on foster youth. I just kind of focused on like the kind of the characteristics in general of like mothers and fathers who commit filicide, and kind of like what are their characteristics, what are their motives.
Okay, got it.
And each of them have like different motives for why they do that, and then kind of just the overarching motive or reason is kind of like the child.
Can you expand a little bit more on the individual differences within mom and dad, like that gender norm or that role as a parent? Like, what were some differences that came across for you, that stood out to you?
Mm-hmm. Are you talking about their motives for doing what they? Motives. Okay, so basically, what I found a lot with mothers who do so, it's a lot of the postpartum depression, psychosis. Mm-hmm. Well, more so the psychosis that kind of leads to those type of things. And then a lot of the times it's more so a, that was kind of, the overarching thing. And then like with the fathers, it was kind of more of like a crime of passion type of thing, where it was like more of an impulse, or like also to the father, if they were going through like a custody battle dispute type of thing, that was like more so their motives, where if they were being sent to court for something like that, their result was to like, you know, murder the child, unfortunately. And then also I found too that fathers end up not only just murdering the child, but the family as a whole.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah. So the mother goes with them as well.
Yeah, because we're talking a little bit about how just reports kind of come out. There's been some that stand out to mind, not specific ones, but, you know, the father killing everyone and then killing himself at the end, right? Mm-hmm. So that's, wow.
I found that a lot in my research too, with like, they kill the whole family and then they end up, killing themselves. It's very, very rare that they don't. And that's probably because they have some sort of like personality disorder that they're like, well, I'm just going to kill my family, but not myself because I'm important, I guess.
Wow. That's just like very eye-opening for sure.
Yeah.
And, you know, well, I just want to definitely congratulate you on getting to this step in your program. And you said in a week you're going to defend your dissertation.
I hope so, yeah.
And so is there like a set date for you to defend, or is it up to you? You have to decide on that.
I need to get my edits in first, and then my dissertation chair is the one that's going to give me my date. Yeah.
Are you ready for that? How you feeling?
I think I better be ready.
You better be ready. You put all this work in.
Shit, seriously.
Yeah, right? It's not easy for sure.
It's definitely
I'm over here just completing my master's thinking, you know, that was crazy. For obviously difference on an individual level, but on a doctorate level, you know, I'm sure it's more demanding, more than a master's to some extent. Was that kind of for you? Because I know you went through the master's in the PsyD program.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I think the more demanding part is the dissertation process. The dissertation process. Like that's the one that, and it really does weave out the people who like are really truly dedicated
like you're
to
made for it or not.
Exactly, because like we were talking about earlier, is that I can't even count in my hands how many times I was like ready to throw in the towel and be like, I'm done, I can't do this anymore. Like, close to just not completing my program.
And then you had coursework with your program too? Yeah. So it's coursework first.
It's all together. Coursework,
Oh,
dissertation, practice. It's literally
dang.
just jumbled on. They're
Okay.
like, here you go.
Oh,
Good
man.
luck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dang. So what were some things that were helpful for you during this, like during your program? Like, was it maybe, especially during the pandemic when things shifted, what were some things that were helpful for you to be successful? Maybe, collaborating with some colleagues or classmates and or anything different. Maybe we're not even thinking about that right now, but what was helpful for you to succeed in this program?
So basically the program is a hybrid program. So it was online and on campus.
Okay.
So the whole transition to fully online because of the pandemic wasn't so stressful on me, fortunately, because I was kind of already used to just, kind of being 50-50.
Right.
So it was a pretty smooth transition. But honestly, like I had a lot of my family was a huge support system for me, huge. Because if it wasn't without them, I probably wouldn't have finished because they were like, no, dude, you got this. You're almost done. Just keep going.
Right.
Definitely reaching out to a lot of friends and a lot of colleagues that were also we're all going through the same shit,
Right.
We're all in this struggle together.
Yeah.
So just reaching out to them and just kind of putting your pride aside and saying hey, I need help.
Right.
And reaching out to your professors too, because, and the big thing too with my professors are just we don't know what's going on with you if you are not talking, if you are not telling us. And I think that's a big thing to just kind of take with you just in life in general. No one's going to know what you're going through if you don't open your mouth and say hey, I need help. And there's no shame in saying I need help.
Definitely. Absolutely not. And I think that's another stigma or a norm, it's like asking for help is weakness or something like that. When it's completely the opposite, it's very courageous.
Yeah.
If not, just something you should do, So definitely want to encourage anyone who's listening, if you need help, there's nothing wrong with asking for help. That's very, very important. If anything, that's going to get you to where you want to go. So don't hold out on that. I'm curious, during this time, in your program, even at the master's level, was there, because I know for me at the master's level, and I can imagine at your level with the PsyD program, especially with the pandemic and just how stressful everything is, did you ever reach out to maybe professional help, like a therapist or anything like that whatsoever?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
and I have no shame in my game.
Yeah, no.
I definitely have been in my own therapy.
Right.
And as a therapist myself, I'm a huge advocate for therapists being being in therapy because for one, you get a feel of what your clients feel when you're, in that chair, and you're able to connect more. And I think that you can't fully be someone else's source of support if you haven't gotten your own source of support. And I'm a huge advocate. I am hell yeah, be in therapy. It's good for you. And finding the right therapist too.
That's
I think that
important too.
Definitely, because I'm not gonna lie, there are a lot of shitty therapists out there, and and that's just, I think that goes for a lot of professions, but just really finding the one that works for you.
Definitely, and I think too, that's the one of the important things too, as a therapist and someone who's completed the program recently. There's talk about not practicing outside of your scope, and if it's not within your scope, refer to someone else.
Definitely.
Right? And I think therapists should do more of that, because there's times where maybe they can feel like they can take everything on, and not necessarily the case sometimes. So going to your point, it's really important to find the right therapist, right? Because everyone has that different background, or maybe they're doing a certain practice or theory and whatnot, and it doesn't work for everyone. So
exactly.
Super important. No, that's awesome. I really, I'm also an advocate for therapy as well, and I think it's not only to similar to you going to therapy as a future therapist, getting some insight on what it's like, but also just how beneficial and amazing it is for yourself and overall healthy development, right? So I definitely agree with you on that. So we've known each other for quite some time.
Yeah. I think since middle school.
Yeah. Oh my God.
We go far back.
Yeah, I actually moved to Norwalk in middle school. So That's crazy. I forgot who I was talking to the other day, but there's very few people that I am still in touch with today that I've known since middle school, and I think it's awesome. Where you can kind of come back and continue that conversation.
Yeah.
And that's really cool to just have those friends who are still in your life for such a long time. Yeah. So when you reached out, about being on the podcast, I was very excited to have you on, especially with in your field and your profession and just you in general. I think it's really cool. So thank you for reaching out for that.
No, thank you for having me. I think this is great.
Yeah. Middle school, high school, then you go to UCSB. So when it comes to high school and your college selection, why UCSB? Did you have other options? Kind of what made you steer in that direction?
So my top school for me was UC San Diego.
Okay.
And I actually didn't get accepted into UC San Diego.
Oh.
And so I was like completely like devastated naturally. Like,
Right.
that was my number one school. And I don't know if you ever heard of the Puente program at Norwalk High. So I was in that. So they did a tour of a lot of the colleges up north. I think there's like UCSB that we went to, Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo. And
I remember that trip that took place. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I did that. And then I remember that I had gone to UC Santa Barbara as one of the stops on the trip. And I really liked it there. It wasn't my top choice, but I was like, okay, if I wanted to get far away from home as possible, but still be close enough in proximity.
Right.
So where I can kind of like go back and forth when I need to. Yeah, exactly. And the other place was UC Santa Cruz, and it was a little too far for me.
That is a little further, right?
Yeah, a little too far for comfort. So I just kind of went to UCSB. I was like, okay, I guess I'll just go here.
I guess, right?
It was a beautiful campus, but honestly, I don't regret that decision. It was one of the best 4 years of my life. I had a lot of great experiences there, met a lot of cool people. So yeah, it was just kind of like I didn't get accepted to my top school, so I guess I'm going here. But it ended up being a great choice.
And I think all three of those options, San Diego, SB, and even Santa Cruz, are all beautiful sceneries.
They
right?
are, yeah.
They're just so, especially Santa Cruz. I think it's deep in the forest.
It is. It's it's a gorgeous campus.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you visit that as well?
I did. Yeah.
Visit there? Okay. And of all three, did you also take a visit to UCSD?
I had never been to UCSD. I don't even know why.
But you already know the area, I'm assuming?
Yeah, I know San Diego. Yeah.
And so San Diego was your first choice?
It was, yeah.
And Santa Cruz was like, I'm not trying to go camping for 4 years.
Hell no.
So let me go by the beach over here.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't blame you for that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. And then, so you had pre-med in mind. Why pre-med?
For me, I think it was more so, it was just kind of to make my parents like proud in a sense, kind of like, oh, like my dad had always wanted to be a doctor, kind of pursue something like that. So it was kind of more like, okay, like he didn't like push me to do that, but I think like I pushed myself to kind of like
Got it. Yeah.
put that pressure on myself to just be like, okay, well, my dad always wanted to be a doctor, like, let me kind of try to like fulfill that dream or whatever, you know. And so it was just kind of more of that pressure that I put on myself to kind of pursue that, and it was not for me.
Going into like the culture, of Spanish, Mexican, Hispanic, Latino, just Latinx in general, is that something that was big for you in your household?
Definitely.
Really? Okay. And then was that something you followed? Were you aware of it? You had no clue? Kind of just, the parenting styles and just culture and how that plays a role in general or in our decision making or just life in general? Like, is that big for you?
I think back then I was like kind of a little more oblivious to it, to be honest. Like you're just kind of like obviously our parents come here, God bless them, to provide for a better life, things like that, for those children of immigrants and stuff. And so naturally, I think we want to kind of fulfill their, dreams or kind of their sacrifice, for what they did and stuff. And I think we kind of just naturally fall into that, like unaware of those, and it wasn't until I think like I kind of started diving more into the fields in the master's program, kind of going through my own therapy to really explore the way my parents, specifically my dad, because my mom, she kind of went back and forth from Mexico to the United States, like throughout her childhood. So she was a little more assimilated to the culture. But my dad didn't get here until he was 23. So he was already kind of like deeper in his roots of like, you know, so it was just kind of how his influence and his culture had, you know, his parenting style had on me, because he was the strict one. He was the one like, you need to get good grades and this and that, and really, really stressed the importance of education.
Right.
But it wasn't until like later on, like I said, that I went through my own therapy and
started to become aware of a little bit of everything.
Really did that self-reflection and was like, holy shit, like they really did influence a lot of.
Right. Isn't that like. Yeah. I agree. Yeah. The same for me. You know, parents, you know, immigrant parents, right, became citizens years later after making it to the U.S. And, my parents were also very high on education. They didn't graduate. They didn't really get past middle school. So that's naturally for them, you know, they're going to push their kids like, you finish in school, you know, whatever. And you about to do all of it. You about to get your PhD. You know,
can go all the way.
You about to start your own school. You know, I didn't get to go to school. You started one.
For real though.
Right? Yeah. Like, and then I remember one thing that my parents did, and this is probably common. Maybe not, but my parents would try to reward me and my brothers for grades, right? Hey, if you get an A, you get this. You get a B, you get this. So, and that actually worked, you know, like, oh, I'm getting all A's. You want to give me $100 for A's?
You're like,
I'm getting all A's, you know? Which is interesting because associating money with grades, as you get older, you know, like I have like but my attachment to money, right? I feel like, okay, that's probably not a good thing, because now you're conditioning me to want to do things and receive some kind of reward for it. But you know, I got over it. It wasn't really a big deal or anything, but that just came to mind right now. Like, I wonder how that played out, but it's not a big thing for me. But yeah, my parents were really big, strict on grades, you know, just everything, right? Because they sacrifice so much, work so hard. They're going to want, you know, the best for their kids. So I definitely can relate in that sense, for
definitely.
sure.
My dad was so hardcore. I remember sometimes I would give him my homework, and if it was like sloppy, he'd erase the whole damn thing. He's like, rewrite it. I'm like, fuck, like no.
Yeah, I spent so much time on that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's awesome. I do appreciate just the culture in general, right? Just now that you're at this level, or at this age, with this experience, is there anything different on how your interpretation, or I'm sure there is, but what are some things that you appreciate more now than maybe that weren't on your mind in the past?
In terms of what, though?
In terms of, I would say family, and also just in general.
I definitely didn't appreciate how strict my dad was back then, especially to like learning Spanish. Like my dad was a big advocate on me being bilingual, which back then growing up, I hated it. I hated having to speak Spanish to him. I'm like, those typical, we're in America, like you need to, you know, like, and you know, I was a little brat back then, but no, I definitely appreciate that now, and just kind of the value that he instilled in those aspects. Could he have been a little bit more like gentle with it? Obviously, you know, his approach wasn't the best, but I do appreciate it in hindsight, because I mean, being bilingual is such
especially in the field, right?
Exactly, like it's so much more needed, because there's a lot of, you know, especially I've worked a lot in community mental health.
Right.
So you do see a lot of the, you know, Hispanic families, Spanish speaking households and everything.
Definitely.
That don't have that opportunity to connect with.
And that's like one of the, you know, Spanish speaking population, right, is one of the, I don't know the facts, but one of the biggest populations that miss out on services.
It's a lot of the minorities,
Right.
a lot of like minorities
Exactly.
that are in dire need of mental health services.
That's true.
And my ability to be able to speak Spanish, and I honestly like seeing their faces light up like, oh, you speak Spanish? Like, yeah, of course I speak
Right.
Spanish. And they're
Yeah.
just like, oh, thank God, because they thought they were gonna have to struggle through
That is true.
the whole process
Right.
trying to speak English or
Right.
things like that. So that's one of the really things that I kind of value. That
That's a great point too. During my internship at Norwalk, there's not many Spanish speaking counselors. There's only one, actually. No, I'm lying. There's two or three. Or anyways, so my supervisor doesn't speak Spanish, so every time she needed a Spanish speaker, she would text me, "Hey, you busy? You have time to do this and that?" So that it just kind of, I bring that up because your Spanish speaking ability is huge when it comes to counseling field in general, education, especially education, right?
Yeah.
'Cause all the parents definitely in need of that. So there was one I had to attend an IEP, and the mom of the student, she was speaking English, not knowing that my supervisor was providing a translator, and then she finally informed her, and she also had a sigh of relief.
Yeah.
So she was very appreciative of me being there to be able to communicate for them, and so I can right away when you were talking about that came to mind. And yeah, parents are just, or guardians in general, right, are just very appreciative of people's Spanish speaking abilities, especially within this field.
yeah, definitely.
Right. Yeah, it's super important. So Jackie, I asked you a series of questions. The first question that I had asked you was, all right, here we go. So I asked you, what are you currently up to? And we obviously talked a little bit about this already. You had mentioned, I am entering my 4th and final year of my doctoral program and finishing up the dissertation process. I currently work at a residential facility with youth struggling with acute mental illness, and you are completing your practicum at a psychiatric hospital. What is the residential facility you're at right now? I don't know if we touched up on that yet.
We didn't, no.
Okay, can you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, I work at Discovery Mood and Anxiety. So it's basically adolescents aged from 13 to 17 years old who are suffering with, acute mental health disorders. So like ranging from depression, so severe suicidal ideations, anxiety, bipolar disorder, things like that. And then also some of them have a dual diagnosis. So there's also substance use in the mix, and just like heavy substance use though too. Like it's honestly quite mind boggling how, we have youth like accessing like
that.
literally like cocaine, meth, heroin, things like that, which is something that it's hard to grasp because they're
Definitely.
children, and so I work with that population currently, and as a therapist there.
How long have you been doing that for now?
I've been there for like 2 years.
Okay. And how did you come across this facility to begin with, to work there? Like, how was this somewhere you had your eye on for a very long time?
No, I was just kind of like in the process of looking for jobs and stuff, something that was flexible with my schedule
Right.
since I was in school. So I think I found them on, I want to say maybe like Indeed or something. Like I can't remember what like job site I found them on. And I
There's
was
so
like,
many now, right?
Yeah, and I was like, oh, cool. Like this seems like pretty interesting. It's working with teens, which is honestly I've worked with. The majority of my work has been with adolescents and children and
Is that
families.
the population you prefer, or?
Absolutely. I know
Right.
people say that teens are difficult and children are difficult to work with,
Right.
like especially, but I think they're the most needed.
Definitely, especially in that transition, right? Like at the middle school, high school level, I think that's that's the population I enjoy working with as well.
Yeah.
I feel like there's so much going on there.
Yeah.
Individual, even at the family level, it's huge. Is this the same facility I think you mentioned earlier that you're providing wraparound services?
No, that was a previous employee.
Oh, okay. Got
Yeah.
it. And the substance abuse, you said there are dual diagnosis, right? Are the common substances that youth are using that you work with cocaine? What are some other common substances that you've come across?
The major one, marijuana.
Right. Okay.
That's pretty huge. The vaping has become so.
I was just gonna say that.
Yeah,
do you see that a lot?
Huge.
Because I know that's growing, right?
The nicotine vaping. Yeah, I've seen that a lot, and those kind of are like the top two, and then you have like the teens who are like into like the hallucinogens, so like the acid, ecstasy, things like that. That's pretty popular too. So those I would say the top three.
Youth with depression, with anxiety, or what's usually their case or diagnosis when they're abusing substances?
With that, it's typically a lot of like depression and anxiety and a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder. Those are like the major three things that you see. And then there are some that are like, schizophrenia, bipolar. But I would say the top three are post-traumatic stress disorder, major depression, and anxiety.
And how are you seeing these youth? Are they coming to you? You go to them, or how does that work? Or is it virtual right now?
So like I said, it's a residential facility. That means is like the kids actually live there.
Oh, right.
So yeah, they're staying there. Facility. Yeah, they're living there. Their stay there is on average about like 30 days or so. Some are there way longer. It really kind of depends on, the severity of their mental health. So I go to them.
Yeah. The residential facility, where are these kids coming from?
A lot of these kids, they end up being discharged from a psychiatric hospital. So basically what ended up leading them to that facility is they were either a danger to themselves, so suicidal ideation, or they've actually had suicidal attempt prior to going to the hospital, or very rarely homicidality, so like intentions on like killing someone else or harming someone else. So a lot of the times overdoses, things like that. So they're stepping down from a psychiatric hospital into the residential, and then some of them go in because their parents know about the program and like want to admit them. So it's like a mix of both. Okay.
And in your experience when working with these kids, or maybe in general throughout your profession, with suicidal ideation, when it comes to one-on-one counseling with them, you're working with them, has there ever been any situations or times where, you felt that you were in danger, or maybe they were in danger and you had to report that, or what has that been like for you?
Honestly, for me, I think suicidality, I feel like it's a topic that, you hear it and like you kind of get like people get scared, like, oh my God, they're suicidal, they want to kill themselves, and they kind of jump towards reactive. They're more reactive about it rather than responding to it. Because obviously it's, as a therapist, when you hear naturally like your client wanting to kill themselves or end their life, it's a huge liability and it does fall on you, and God forbid, that ends up happening. But I used to research actually adolescent and children's suicide. I was part of the LA County Child and Adolescent Suicide Review team. And I researched that for quite some time, and basically kind of reviewing cases of children who have committed suicide and kind of what the risk factors were, if there were any protective factors in place, and just kind of getting that towards like, hopefully into the schools, because like we say, a lot of the things happen in school. Right. And just kind of bringing that awareness to families of like what to look for. So the topic of suicide is not scary for me. So when I'm with a client and they say that they're suicidal, I don't automatically jump towards like, do I need a call to get you evaluated to see if you need to be admitted to a hospital? Have I had that happen because I felt like, okay, like you're for sure not safe. Like, let me get a second opinion. Right. And then that's when you call the psychiatric evaluation team, and then they come in and do their evaluation. But I want to say like I've done that of the 5 years I've been doing therapy. I want to say I probably have done that like a handful of times. So not that much. That's because good. You don't want to scare people into thinking like, just because I'm having these thoughts that they're going to be hospitalized. Right. And I think that's something that we need to kind of move away from. and as therapists kind of really know how to handle those situations and check our own feelings about what that brings up for us. Because I think a lot of the times the way that the therapist responds is how they feel about it.
Right.
You know, are you scared of the topic? Are you scared to explore that with the client? Because it is a huge responsibility to have, like, you know, and those questions to ask are necessary. And there's this huge thing too, where I don't know, people think that, you know, by asking someone, hey, are you feeling suicidal, that's going to plant the seed in there. And it doesn't, you know, it really doesn't. That's a huge myth. It's important to just straight up and ask, like, hey, like, have you thought about killing yourself? If you did, like, how would you do it? Like, have you thought about that? And just really being straightforward with it.
Have to.
And being honest, because I think also too, clients can gauge where you're at and your discomfort, and, you know, not just that topic, big topics in general, and they can really read you too.
Yeah,
you know,
that's how you would be able to build that relationship with them.
Exactly.
If you're just yourself and you're honest and open.
The most authentic you can be is honestly.
Absolutely, I agree. And I think going back to, that's why it's important to go to therapy yourself.
Absolutely.
Right? To explore yourself, right? These triggers or whatever it may be. Because when it comes down to it, you know, you're sitting in the client's seat when it comes to, or your own seat, but when you're in the opposite seat, it's like you kind of understand what's happening here, or the process, right? Especially when it comes to like the therapeutic process, just in general. That reminds me of just like how people back away from the word suicide or having that conversation. That reminds me of how people also talk or don't feel comfortable talking about, this is something that's within a disability community. Like, oh, you know, don't say you're disabled, or, you know, you're not disabled, you have an alternative ability. Like, what? No, like, I'm embracing this, you know what I mean?
Like, let's fucking call it for what it is, right?
Yeah, so I totally can relate to that, and I'm one of those individuals as well who wants to explore that, wants to learn more about just what's in the client's mind and what their thoughts are in general. But I think that's awesome though, that you're not afraid of taking that on, you know? And I think as we all should be, as therapists, clinicians, whatever the case may be, like, we have to be there for our client, right? For ourselves as well as our profession. So I think that's cool. That's really good. And then as far as you've never felt in danger yourself, like your life in any kind of group or individual setting?
Honestly, I have not. And I've worked with pretty hardcore. I've worked with parolees before in the past, where you would think, or even at Metro State too, like and even to right now at the psychiatric facility, like, I personally have not felt in danger. Obviously, you always want to be aware of your clients, their backgrounds, their surroundings and everything, but also understanding too that they're human. We're all human. Like, they're not some freak of society or whatever. Like, and the more you can connect to them and understand that they're human too, and building that authentic connection, it goes a long way in the room, and it really opens, and I feel like really fosters that change.
Definitely. And being honest with yourself, you know, because there's things where on an individual level, you know, we may not be looking ourselves, you know, at our whole self on a more honest level, and there be maybe some things that we don't want to talk about or discuss. But yeah, nobody's perfect. You know, we're all humans, and we have, you know, our goods and bads. So it's really important if we could reflect on ourselves. That may help when it comes to the, you know, others.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
I asked you, what do you think people underestimate about you the most? And you had mentioned that was a tough question.
Yeah, because I don't know what people would underestimate about me, to be honest. I never really thought about that. Yeah, it's never, you know,
Definitely. No, I feel for you on that. Like, who cares what people think?
Yeah, I try not to think about that sometimes. It's hard, obviously, you know, naturally as like human beings, we
and just the internet and all this
tend to gravitate towards like, okay, like, does this, at least me personally, like, does this person like me? Okay. And then like I think about it and I'm like, whatever, I don't care.
Like, yeah. How, you know, kind of staying on this topic or expanding on it, how do you have you ever come across any difficulties with like yourself, or maybe social media, or what people's opinions? Like, how do you handle that? Has that always been something where you're just like, I don't care, easy to brush off? Has it been something that was an issue for you in the beginning? Like because I know it's a common thing where people care so much about what people think about them. So where are you on that?
I think for now, for the most part, it's something that I can kind of easily brush off, unless it's someone who's like super close to me, or like someone that I like, genuinely care for, like, where I'm kind of more so like, hey, like, I don't, want you to take things the wrong way or anything like that. But as a general whole, like from people in general, I think I'm at the point where sometimes I just really don't care, but it hasn't always been that way for sure. Like
took some work.
Yeah, it's definitely taken some work, and really self-reflecting on what's important and, what's not important. And just, I think really understanding who I am as a person, and really being confident in who I am, that has kind of helped me not care so heavily on the opinions of other people.
Just loving yourself.
But I think it's a constant Definitely. Journey. It's never okay, I found myself and I'm good. And like,
I just Googled me. I'm good now.
And then like, I'm good, but I think it's an uphill battle. It's like a struggle,
Yeah. That's a daily thing,
For
when
sure.
it comes to, our goals and dreams and wanting to kind of make things happen. Like it takes consistency. It takes daily activity, work, whatever it may be. Like, there's no shortcut with that, right?
There isn't. It's honestly like the work on yourself is an everyday thing. I always I make the analogy between, because I used to work out. I stopped for a bit because of the pandemic and whatever. But
Same here.
I would compare it, and you can probably compare it to any other things too. It's like working on yourself spiritually, mentally, emotionally. It's like working out. You're in the gym every single day, right? You're gaining your muscle. You're doing this, you're doing that. But to maintain it, you have to keep going, right? Because if you stop going, it's not like you're going to stay buff or have that muscle forever. You're going to eventually lose it.
Unless you're Miguel Rivera, then it's permanent.
Exactly. No, you're good, right? Yeah, exactly.
No, you're absolutely right, though.
So that's kind of what I compared it to one time. Like I was making the analogy to one of my friends, like, because he's just like, I start feeling good and then I stop doing what I'm doing. And I'm like, that's the problem. Right. And I think that's a lot of, like, myself included too. Like, I'm not good. Like, I think that's the problem for a lot. I would say maybe a lot of people, it's like the inconsistency of it. Like you go and you start feeling better and naturally you're like, okay, I feel great now. Like I don't need to do whatever it is that I need to do. And then you fall back into.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I agree. Like people are looking for that satisfaction. Once they get that taste or that feeling, then they're like, oh, cool, I could, take a break or whatever distraction comes up. That reminds me of just how active people are on social media.
Yeah.
Right? And just the short attention span and that quick fix, boom.
The instant gratification, right? Yeah.
And so I think that's another growing issue that's going to be huge in decades to come, right? There's going to be so, if not already. I forgot this one documentary on Netflix that talks about how these, I was going to say pharmaceutical, but these technology companies who design these platforms, Instagram, Facebook, like they have people in there who know how to capture your attention and get you to stay hooked.
I think I know what you're talking about. I forgot what it was called too. But it's like, watching it like was such a trip. Like,
right. Like they're literally, these are the individuals who literally design the what is it? Not the formula.
The software, right?
The software and just how they operate. And he's literally saying, we designed it in a way where people become addicted. And that's not good. And so they really go into just how the mental health aspect of it and how dangerous and harmful it can be.
Oh, absolutely.
And so that's where we currently are at,
Yeah.
If not, we're not even probably at the peak of it yet.
Huh?
We're not even at the peak. And so, that really came to mind as we were talking about that. And I think it's, that's why. It's
going to be a lot of work for us later on,
a lot of work. So I asked you something you do regularly, a practice or a habit that's challenging but totally worth it. You had mentioned a practice I do almost regularly is drink at least 64 ounces of water. I think we underestimate how important drinking water is. It's a challenge to make sure I meet my water intake, but I do it regularly.
Yeah.
Why is that so important for you?
Because I mean, I'm not sure if you know, but like we're composed of majority water. And the slightest form of dehydration can really like impact your mental health on top of a lot of other things. And I was never really like a big like water drinker and stuff, but I have noticed that like with being on top of my water intake and everything, your mind kind of clears up and stuff. And like your mood is a little bit different too.
A little more energy too. I notice in the morning right away, that's one key time of the day to drink water, you know, right in the morning. That's what I do. And right away, I've noticed myself when I do that, when I don't do that. When I do it, I'm ready to take on the day.
Yeah.
You know, when I don't do it, I'm kind of a little sluggish, like, you know, I'm looking for something to kind of get it going. You know, but yeah, water is a huge difference maker.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How long have you been doing this now? You've been, I mentioned, you mentioned it's a challenge, but you're making sure you're doing it.
Yeah.
And you've been good with that?
Pretty much. Okay. I even downloaded an app that like reminds me like, hey, drink your water. Yeah, you know, and things like that are helpful.
I did that with fasting, intermittent fasting.
Okay.
There's an app, I forget the name of it. I think it's called Zero. But it's like a little timer and it reminds you of like, okay, you know, you want to do this type of fast, or this fast, and they educate you on it and whatnot. And so, yeah, that helps a lot with kind of being consistent.
Exactly.
You know, and that consistency is important, right? As we were talking about earlier. So, yeah, I can totally relate to that. And I think for me, as someone, just in general, water is important. But someone with a disability and a spinal cord injury, water is like life or death. Because it could really lead to like a UTI, and that could lead to problems, and you know, so there's so much more of that. But I totally agree with you on that. So I remember your mom in 8th grade. Didn't she go to our American Heritage?
She did go, yes.
Oh, I forgot I had Matthew on the podcast not too long ago, and we talked about American Heritage. And man, every time I come across someone who went to the trip, we always talk about it. Yeah. And till this day, that's one of my favorite trips of all time.
Honestly, same.
Right?
Same.
Yeah. I went to New York 2 years ago, and right away, I was just instant flashbacks, and I wanted to revisit like all these different places. Didn't go to the Statue of Liberty, but I wanted to go and check out, I don't know if you remember, but we had like wrote our names on the dock.
And we got in trouble for it.
And they were like, I forgot who it was, Roper, or I don't know who.
It was. I think it was Roper.
They wrote on the Statue of Liberty. We wrote on the dock where everybody has written, you know, like we
did not go vandalize the statue.
They were saying like, we got to send them back. I think they were, and they freaking wanted to send us back. Thankfully they did it, but
I know
we missed out on, I don't know if all of us did, but we missed, at least I remember missing out on the Lion King play on Broadway.
You didn't miss much, to be honest.
Okay, cool. I was worried that I did it. And every time I see it now, I'm like, man, I can't believe I missed it. It must be good. Cool. That was like the biggest thing that we didn't get to attend. So, but yeah, that trip was awesome though, right?
It was great. I think it was like a really fun trip, and we got to explore so many different cool sites, and so many different things.
That's cool that your mom was able to go too.
I know, it was awesome.
Do you guys ever bring that up or not at all?
We do from time to time, like whenever I bring up like Victor Ramos or just kind of things like that.
He's doing his thing. You see his cooking.
Heck yeah, all that stuff looks so delicious.
I'm gonna have him on the podcast a little later. So
how exciting!
I'm looking forward to talking a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Have you gone to New York or any of those cities or states that we visited since then?
I have. I've been to New York twice since. Nice. I had a cousin who lived in New Jersey, so she was an hour away from New York City, and we took like a day trip to just the city, and then I went last year in February, March. I went to New York again with Madeline. I don't know if you remember Madeline. Yeah.
She went to Norwalk, right?
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I went with her. And it was great. But yeah, same too. Like going, I'm like Times Square and then seeing the red stairs where we all took the picture. And I think I was like going through my stuff not too long ago, and I found the picture of all of us. Nice. All of us. Like,
I remember that. Do you remember the Philly cheesesteak place we went to?
Yeah,
in Philadelphia?
I do remember it.
When I went to New York about, I don't know, a year or two ago, I went back to the Philly cheesesteak spot. And I was like, it's in Philly, not in New York. About a 2-hour drive. I was like, yo, we got to make this drive.
We got to do it.
These Philly cheesesteaks were bomb. And so we made it. I was like, wow, it looks exactly the same.
That's so crazy.
You know, and then obviously it's super crazy for me because being from the West Coast and then traveling to the East Coast, then going back to, you know, last time me being here was then. So it was really cool just to kind of reflect on that and appreciate all those memories. And the Rocky Steps, that was cool too.
Oh, yeah.
We did that.
That's awesome.
That was my favorite trip for sure.
Yeah.
Now that, you know, right now it's a little bit different with the pandemic going on, but maybe not. Outside of work, what are some things that you're currently up to?
Oh, gosh. Honestly, right now, outside of work and school and stuff, I kind of have just been hanging out more so with like family, to be honest, and just kind of really like rebuilding those connections and things like that. And outside of that, I enjoy my solitude sometimes, only because I deal with people on the basis or on the daily. And just kind of being able to disconnect from the everyday things that I hear. Definitely being a therapist, it's not just sitting there, you know, in an office. Like you're really taking on a lot of people's
let's talk
stuff,
about that.
You know, like just in so my recharge is just being home sometimes and just kind of like, you know, enjoy
doing your own thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So I kind of do that, reconnect with family. That's kind of just how I recharge.
Are there ever times when you're recharging or at home, you know, where you just don't feel like talking?
Oh, absolutely. There's so many times.
Right.
And so sorry to all my friends that but there's times where it's like I'll make plans with someone because like in that moment I'm like, yeah, I'm so up for it. And then when it comes down to it, like depending on the day that I've had at work, I'm just kind of like just so mentally drained that like sometimes you just don't want to socialize with anybody.
That is so real though, right? Like
legit
being in this work.
Yeah.
You know, it sticks to you.
Yeah.
And then obviously with like transference, counter transference, but then just kind of coming back like I don't want to talk to you right now. You know? Like that's kind of how I feel sometimes. And I barely completed my program and did my hours and all that. So I haven't even got into the depth of it, but
it doesn't take that long to even experience that.
Yeah. So I definitely experienced that and can totally, you know, just say that it's how real it is.
Yeah, for sure.
And also at the same time, I think outside of that in general, like just being a therapist or a counselor, I think being comfortable with being on your own is very important. You know, being okay with being alone, having your own space, like that is very, very important.
Absolutely.
Would you agree with that?
No, I absolutely do agree.
Yeah.
You know,
because I know there's people who struggle with being alone or don't like that time alone in general. So, which I can understand, but at the same time now, maybe just with age, I don't know, but I appreciate just being alone and doing my thing. Maybe because I have a lot to do or I don't know what, but I definitely enjoy my alone time more than I have in the past.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think it definitely does. I mean, I would say it comes with age too. Yeah.
Right.
That's how it's been for me. Because back then I was always like, I need to be doing something. I need to be out and about. You know, and now I'm just kind of like, oh, I'm okay with like being home and just kind of chilling for the night.
Cool with it. Just chilling, throw on a movie real quick.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, just hang out. Because there's always now, like especially with grad school, or at least for me during my program, I was like, man, I just want a day where I don't want to do nothing. You know, I don't want to do no assignments, no deadlines, worry about this video, like for the program or whatever it may be. Did you come across a lot of those, or till this day, I'm sure?
Definitely those days. And I give myself those days. I allow myself to, you know, and it wasn't always easy for me because I was like, you know, and I still am like very anxious, you know. So, but back then I was always like, you know, even when I did have a, you know, so to speak, a day off, like where I was like, okay, like I don't have really assignments to do. I don't really have like anything, like let me just, you know, chill and relax. But I could still never relax because I was just like fuck, like I'm so used to doing things all the time. I'm so used to like having to do something, or, you know, I would feel guilty for not doing anything. And I'm like, crap, you're being lazy, you're being this, you're being that, like, and just kind of really beating myself up for it. And then now I've just kind of really truly learned to appreciate how to turn off and really tune in.
Right. Exactly. I totally agree with you. I remember having those days as well where being in school and just not knowing how to turn it off, and always wanting to be on, or I feel like I have to do something, you know, and I didn't like that feeling, even though there were some things I had to do. But at the same time, I would kind of, you know, reflect and be like, this isn't healthy, you know, to try to do so many things and do this and that. Like, you have to schedule that downtime.
Absolutely.
Like, you have to. You know, and so now for you, what are some ways that you unplug or turn off or schedule that downtime? Is it just easy for you to do it now, or how do you kind of practice that for yourself?
I think it's become a little too easy for me to do that.
Right.
But I mean, a little more so. But no, I think the days that I do like have completely off, it's become pretty easy for me to just kind of like not focus so much on homework or, you know, even too with my dissertation and all that stuff. I've kind of really learned to like be okay with not touching my dissertation for like a few days and not feeling like, oh crap, I wasted 3 days and not did anything productive or things like that. I still kind of struggle with it a little bit, but I'm able for the most part to just enjoy whatever times I do have off to myself.
Right now, how do you practice self-care? Like, not only now, but just kind of, I'm looking at like as far as your schooling, like in that period of time. Like, were you able to incorporate self-care for you during school? I'm because I know it was talked about all the time in the program, especially when that was the chapter or topic at discussion. But was that something you always done? Were you unaware of self-care practices and why that's important? And how has that changed for you?
It's definitely been a journey to kind of, because my self-care, I think, kind of changes from time to time on like what I'm finding useful at the moment. For at one point, a big part of my self-care was like attending my weekly therapy sessions, you know. But for the majority, it's kind of really trying to stay active, whether it's going on a walk, whether it's really talking to friends, talking to family, staying connected in those aspects. And then also, too, I think a big part of my self-care that's become more relevant now is setting boundaries.
Ooh, that's a good
setting
one.
Boundaries.
Super important.
Because the more, I think that's the biggest piece of self-care you can give yourself is to set boundaries within yourself and then set boundaries with other people. Oh my God,
it's critical.
And that's been huge for me.
Huge. I know I wasn't introduced to boundaries. I don't know if this is the same for you, but for me, I wasn't introduced to the importance of setting boundaries until grad school.
Yeah,
you
same.
know, and you know, you think of like when I did start to learn about boundary setting and what it is and what it looks like and how different it can look for everyone, it's like, yo, why am I just now talking about this or learning about this or understanding the importance of boundary setting, right? Like, these are things that people probably naturally do already, but at the same time, people probably don't. But I feel like boundary setting, boundaries in general should be talked about much earlier in life.
Absolutely.
You agree?
Honestly, they should be talked about from like infanthood, like to be honest, because I've seen a lot of different posts too, like with, you know, children and stuff like that. And like,
oh, you're so right.
I think a lot of the times it's our parents who kind of, no shade to parents. I know you guys are doing the best that you can with what you knew and this and that, but a lot of times it's our own parents who violate our boundaries. And then that's kind of teaches us to not really respect our own boundaries, you know, especially with like you see a lot of times like where the kid is like, you know, doesn't want to say hi to whoever, and then like the parents like, go give them a hug, go get, you know, and it's like the kid doesn't want to, and then they're forced to give, you know, and it's like, that's a huge violation of that kid's boundaries, you know? So I think it starts from then.
And then also on that, like, also boundary setting when it comes to their access to certain things as a child, like the screen.
Definitely.
I see that's the one I see like all the time.
All the time.
And I kind of, again, no shade towards parents, but that's not the healthiest thing to do.
No.
And so I see that a lot, and I feel like I don't know if I'm not trying to throw any shade or anything like that, but I don't think that a child, especially an infant, younger than 1 or even below 5 or anyone in general, even adults, should have the screen in their face for half of the day.
I 100% agree with you. 100%. I've worked with countless of families where their babysitter is their PS5 or their iPhones and this and that, and it's like a huge reliance on technology. And I get it. I'm sure it's hard to be a parent, and I understand like sometimes the parent needs to disconnect too.
Definitely.
And stuff. But I feel like, limiting that device time,
That's just how important like all these things that we've been talking about are, because if we when it comes to being a parent and we got to kind of assign babysitter duties to technology, there's some things that we can probably learn within that. But I think it's very important that because that makes me think about the documentary on Netflix with being on the screen, social media, being addicted to that and all the things that go within that. I think that's kind of leading towards that path. So definitely. Hopefully there's some parents listening and who can take that on, but hey, it's totally your call. You guys are the professionals, not us. But so as you work at the residential facility, are there parents there, or is it only kids and like a guardian, or how is that
It's
structured?
only kids.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Their parents literally put their kids in our hands, and we are responsible for those kids while they are in our facility.
Wow.
But they do have a weekly family meeting or family sessions. Okay. So the family is still incorporated in the treatment.
Good.
But they don't live there with the child.
And then you can counsel the family and the child at the same time, or how do you go about that?
So basically, with family therapy, there's typically the identified patient. So for lack of a better words, that's where who the family deems the quote unquote problem child, which is usually the kid who is in the facility. So the therapy is kind of centered around the child, but you really, at least for myself, when I do family therapy, I focus on the family structure as a whole and the dynamic of the family. How is their communication style? Is there even communication within the family? Like, how are the roles played out? Who's playing what roles?
Right.
Is it the oldest child being the parent, type of thing? So I really, more common than we think. Way more common than we think, that where the child is parentified and kind of forced to really take on the role as one of the parents.
Do you see that more common in like a single parent household? Doesn't really matter, or when the child is parentified? Do they have both parents in that situation?
A lot of the times they do have both parents, but it's in households where I predominantly, like when I worked with Hispanic families, it's in the household where the father is the sole provider, and then or the mother is, or they're both kind of working type thing too. So the burden is kind of left on the oldest child because they're kind of like the right hand to the mom and stuff. So that's kind of where I see that dynamic happening a lot, where either father is the sole provider, so mom is left just with the children. She kind of needs that assistant, or they're both working and they need that.
That makes me think a lot about kind of the same topic, but going a little bit in a different direction during just kids that I worked with and with the pandemic and kind of everyone being at home and just not being able to escape or get away from certain things that may trigger these kids, right? Like, so that was and then, students with disabilities not being able to receive their accommodations. So I was very outspoken when it comes to like, yo, what's up with these accommodations? But obviously there are like limitations when it comes to that from a virtual standpoint. But it was sad. It was very sad to work and speak with some of these kids and these parents, and just misunderstandings left and right, just never being open or communicating or not wanting to, especially from the parent to the child level, as far as being open to hearing what they have to say.
What the child has
to say. And that was like a common thing that I got from a lot of the young people that I worked with. And I really was empathetic towards them, because that must be tough, right? And especially now everything's at home. You can no longer go to school and kind of get away from certain things. Now you have to face it every single day.
Every day, yeah.
And still keep up. And then the school is still expecting you, or teacher is still expecting you on an individual level to, hey, turn this in, or, do that, or, and then, oh my God, there's so many different factors,
Dude, I 100% agree. I see that a lot with the kids that I work with, a lot of, and I like to, sometimes when I run my groups at either the residential facility or the psychiatric, I like to give these children and adolescents a voice, in a place to really let out their frustrations towards their parents, of like, a lot of the time, half these kids like are just not being heard.
Exactly.
They're not being heard by their parents. They're being invalidated so often. And all these kids they need someone to understand them.
Right. I really appreciated that too about groups. In a virtual setting, a little bit different, but that was still enough for students to kind of open up and express themselves. And one thing that I noticed was there was a lot of commonalities within each of them, even though they never seen each other in person during the school year. Like, they were all feeling the same. Yeah. They were all just tired of the same thing. They wanted nothing to do with everything relating to school. Sometimes the group as well. But at the same time, I realized that the time they had with me was a time they looked forward. They looked forward to that time.
That's so good.
And so I was like, okay, I must be doing a good job. I must be, doing good. And that was cool, because I was really happy that they were able to be in a happy place, even if it was for 30 minutes, right? Yeah. So that also told me, though, just how down they were as, students in their own little stage of development, wherever they're at, right? Yeah. So yeah, that definitely stood out to me, and that's one of my biggest motivators to going back. Now that I'm done with my program, I want to go straight into there and help these kids out, because when they come back, now that they're back, there's going to be more need. There already is. We were talking a little bit about that earlier. So it's sad, but I'm looking forward to supporting these kids and these families during this time. But yeah, I'm appreciative of that. And any young people, I guess we're young people also, but any adolescents out there just who are listening, if, you shouldn't, first ask your parents for permission to listen to this podcast if you are. If not, we're here for you guys.
Yeah, right? Definitely.
We're here for you. And we hear you and we see you. So don't think you're not being heard. Just reach out. Yeah. Rapid fire questions, Jackie. You ready? Mm-hmm. All right, here we go. Before we go into that, where can people find you online? Is there anywhere people can get in contact with you? Do you want people to get in contact with you? How are you feeling about that?
My Instagram is just it's not any business related or anything like that. So, I don't really care if you follow me on that. But if you did have any questions about mental health in terms of how can you find a therapist, how to go about finding one, you can definitely feel free to email me, Jackie, JACKIE.sandoval@live.com. And yeah, you can just email me and I'll,
there you
any
go.
questions you guys have or anything.
Email Jacqueline, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll put that also in the description and everything in case people do want to reach out to you for that. That's awesome. All right, you ready?
Yeah.
So rapid fire questions. You don't know how many I'm going to ask you. First thing that comes to mind, just spit it out. All right. When you're not working, how do you like to spend your time?
Watching crime documentaries.
Oh, okay. Any specific like network or type of like a show that you watch?
I recently got into this YouTube series. It's called CJS or something like that, or JCS, and it talks about a lot of different crimes that have like people that have committed crimes in the past, and it just kind of goes through the forensic psychology of like the person being interviewed and all that stuff. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I can tell you've been watching it. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah.
A meal that you absolutely love and recommend our listeners to try for themselves.
Oh gosh, my mom's cooking her enchiladas.
Oh, her enchilada, you said?
Yes.
Hey, there you go. What is something that most people get wrong about you?
I would say, oh shit, you stumped me there. But I mean, I think they get wrong I would say, fuck, I don't know. I can't answer that.
We can go back. We
Yeah.
can go back. If not, we can always pass. What was your first job?
My first job was at Hollister in.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
The mall?
The mall.
Which one?
Yep. The one in Downey. I was, I think, like 17 or something.
Oh, Hollister.
That was literally my first
That used to be
job.
the spot, huh? Is Hollister still around?
I think it is.
Oh, I haven't been to the mall in a while, so Hollister. I remember there's so many people on Hollister back then. When you think of the word successful, who is the first person that comes to mind and why?
The first person that comes to mind and why? I would say one of my professors, and just because she is out there doing her thing. She's a forensic psychologist. She has a script conference that she hosts, and it basically focuses on the stigma of men in particular, survivors of trauma, sexual trauma. So she really emphasizes on that, and she actually got me really into kind of what I want to pursue. So I think she's pretty successful.
That is cool. That's super cool. One piece of advice that you want all listeners to take with them after listening to this episode?
I would say is stay true to yourself. Like really stay true to who you are, and be confident in who you are.
I love it. Last question. Tell me one thing you are grateful for.
My family and my health.
Nice. There you go. Jacqueline, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Loved having you on, and I'm looking forward to having you on again in the future.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me.
All right.